On this one, the MotoGP season wraps up in Valencia. Jason and I are going to talk about that. Plus, the MotoGP teams stuck around and tested on Tuesday, Wednesday. A lot of great stuff to talk about there. And MotoAmerica, a team left the paddock. Is it time to panic? We'll address all that and more right now on the podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Greg's Garage Pod with Jason and Greg. I'm Greg, and joining me is Jason. Jason, what's up, man?
Good morning, Greg. How's things going for you this morning?
Pretty good, man. Sky is clear.
All ready to eat? You ready to eat tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm ready to eat. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. If you're actually loading us up, on the day that we're recording this, which is Wednesday. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. What are your plans, man?
I'm chilling at home. So good to be home with as much traveling as I do and everything. It's just I got mom here cooking, and yeah, that's going to be it. Maybe watch a little football. I don't think your Patriots are playing tomorrow, are they? They're not playing, I don't think so.
Nah, Patriots aren't playing tomorrow, no.
Yeah, so then I'll probably watch now just because of that.
Is that the way it's going to be?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I just have no interest in watching them. So I know I'm going to get all the Northeast hate now just for me saying that, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, your Eagles are in the Northeast, so whatever.
Stink. They're horrible.
But this is not a football podcast. This is a motorcycle racing podcast. So before we get into all of our great topics, you were telling me that over the weekend you were actually testing a motorcycle to go to Phillip Island later on, actually the beginning of 2019. Tell me about that.
You know what? We went last year, and it's such a great event. Phillip Island is just such an incredible place. And last year I talked to Colin. It was Phillip Island Classic, Greg. It's a race that I've known about for a number of years when I was racing overseas, and I got to be friends with a lot of the guys that do it. And I'd always been told about the Phillip Island Classic, and last year just happened to be the 25th running of it, 25th year they'd had it, and they get like 60 or 70,000 people there for the 3-day event. And I mean, it's so busy, it's so packed there. People, I think it's second to MotoGP as far as attendance goes. And I went over there last year. Colin went, Jake Zemke went. Colin kind of had told me, I knew there had to be a reason why Colin was going, because as much traveling as he does, why did he want to leave again? And
Colin Edwards you're talking about, right?
Yeah, he said the track was just so incredible. So I put a small group of people together. We went over there and did a couple track days. Then I did the race and had a blast. And so this last weekend, we just kind of dusted off the bike I rode last year and went out to Willow Springs and just ran it in a little bit. So it was fun for me because I went up there and just had a fun time with some friends, just rode. Wasn't having to teach or do any of that stuff. It was just simply just go out there and have a blast around for a couple of days. It was a good time. So
it's called the Phillip Island Classic. Then what kind of motorcycles do you ride?
Well, I'm riding kind of something that you would have never seen back in 1982, but it's an FJ 1200 motor, and the chassis is a special race design chassis called a CMR chassis. It built by a guy named Dennis Curtis up in Canada. And the chassis itself is really interesting. It's pretty stiff and rigid. It's probably the closest thing I would ever get to running a Moto2 type bike. That's the only thing I can kind of equate it to, because the bike, it doesn't really do a lot of things that a regular bike nowadays does. And there's so many characteristics of this bike that I like over bikes that I currently ride, in the sense that bikes of our generation now. But it is just, it's old FJ 1200 motors. They call it, I think, period 6, period 5 is what they call the class itself. But you get Harris frames with Yamaha motors or old Suzuki motors in it. And I just put it in perspective. Last year when we went there, I think that about 4 days after we were there, the Australian Superbike guys were testing. And I think the bikes we were on are only about 4 to maybe 5 seconds slower than what the Superbikes are going. So I think Jeremy Williams went like a minute 36.8 last year. And I think the MotoGP guys race around that place in 29 and 30s. So you can, wow. It's really nothing. I mean, when you consider we're on an old FJ 1200 motors, it's only like 5 or 6, 7 seconds off of MotoGP times. It's competitive. It's fun. A lot of guys last year: Peter Hickman, Dan Linfoot, Steve Martin, Jeremy McWilliams. It just goes right down the list of. There's just kind of a who's who. Troy Corser last year, Colin Edwards, Jake Zemke. And so now they kind of do it as a match race, Greg. So it's U.S. versus England versus Australia and I believe New Zealand. And this year the British team doesn't sound like they're going, which is a real bummer because they've kind of been the staple that you bench yourself against. And this year we're trying to ramp it up a little bit with our American team to try to get it over there and make a bit more of a presence for Team USA. And so I've reached out to a few of my friends, and I'm sure there'll be some announcements coming up in the next few weeks. But I've reached out to a couple of my friends that I raced with and raced against, and I think this year we'll have a bit more of a stronger effort for Team USA.
How was Willow?
Bumpy.
Willow Springs, you said, right?
But it was great. When I say it's bumpy, I actually love Willow. I cut my teeth there as a kid, and
Yeah, but I haven't been there in years, and I was actually wondering how it's held up because I haven't really heard a lot out of Willow lately. You know,
it's fine. Willow's Willow. It doesn't ever seem to change. In fact, I took my mom with me, which was probably one of the most exciting parts of the thing for me because I took my mom with me, and as I was pulling into the track with her on Saturday morning, I said, "Mom, when was the first time you came to Willow Springs?" And she said, "1964." Wow. And I was like, "Wow!" When her and my father came to America in 1964. They drove all the way across from New York and ended up in California. And Willow Springs was the first track that they got introduced to. So it was fun for me having my mom out there, and she enjoyed just being there, talking to people and meeting some of my new friends from riding and racing that she hasn't met over the last 10 or 15 years. Obviously, because I haven't been doing much racing, obviously, over here in America for that period. So it was a good time.
And what about Phillip Island? You know, like, how good was that place? That was your first trip?
Unbelievable. And I know you've been there. You've been there once, right, Greg? Did you go there once?
No, I've been there three or four times. 4 times, 3 riding and 4 overall. I went as a GP, as a fan one year with Steve Rapp.
That's right. I know you and I talked about you being there. You can't really describe it. I've been to racetracks all over the world. Phillip Island is by far the greatest one I've ever been to. It kind of epitomizes everything. It kind of epitomizes everything that road racing should be for me. It's fast. It's got lean angle. It flows. There's not like chicanes and things like that you deal with at other tracks around the world. Yeah. Anyways, it's I don't know how to describe it other than it's just beautiful. When you come down the front straightaway, all you do is see is ocean, don't you, Greg? I mean, you just see this.
So cool.
You see this ocean, and then it looks like there's just tons of grass. It looks like a golf course on the ocean. Is what it looks like, and except for it's just the most amazing racetrack in the world. Stoner Corner might be the best corner I've ever gone through. That and the last corners there. I don't know if there's anything too much better than those 2 turns. What was your favorite part of that track?
Yeah, I definitely like the last corner just because it's a very technical corner, and I nailed it maybe once or twice, you know, in the couple times I was there. Really nailed it, like where I felt like I just absolutely had that thing dialed in. And I like that last corner because it starts like the corner before. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like it's not just that final corner leading onto the front straightaway reminds me a lot of just like Laguna as a racetrack. It's a very technical racetrack. You've got to be disciplined at Laguna Seca to hit all your marks and do a good lap time as much as you do that final corner. But I enjoyed the island itself, the atmosphere. It's a lot smaller, you know, than I thought. You know, you see the footage and everything, but when you roll in there and you actually see the track, the whole facility is smaller, and it was pretty neat. One of the times that we were there, though, there was a wallaby bouncing down the front straightaway, and they red flagged our session, and they started telling us, like, look, man, you know, kangaroo is one thing, a wallaby's a bigger thing, and they were like, you do not want to be wide open and smack into a wallaby because the wallaby and you and the bike are all going to lose. You know,
Greg, we had the same thing happen when we were there. So it's funny that you say that because the exact same thing, they had to red flag, not our race, but during the course of the weekend, they have, you know, a bunch of historic races over there. And they had to red flag the race for the same exact reason. Going through Hayshed or whatever, there was a wallaby bouncing around. And so they had to red flag the races. So that and the birds and all that stuff that are happening over there are pretty, it just makes for a really interesting week or an interesting day riding that place. But the week that we go over there, it's something that I put on my calendar already, and hopefully I can do it for many years to come because it's just a blast. And hopefully I'll have some more information for us on the podcast over the next couple of weeks about what else is going to happen over there. But let's talk about another track I've been to, Greg. Let's talk about Valencia. We had the final MotoGP of the year this last weekend in Valencia. Unfortunately, the weather was pretty crap for those guys all weekend long, which is a shame because I've been to Valencia 3 times during the Grand Prix, and I've gone over there and ridden it another time. The thing about Valencia, which is great, is it's almost as much hype as the beginning of the season. I think that's what makes MotoGP so great right now, is there's just hype every weekend. But I think with the tests and everything that comes up the week, that the days leading up to it afterwards, going into 19, it really creates a lot of atmosphere around that final Grand Prix. And what's your takeaway? I know what my takeaway for the weekend is. What's your takeaway from the weekend?
Well, let's just recap. Let's start off with the GP race,
Yeah.
and give some results just to let people in on what happened. So in the MotoGP race, the Premier Class race, there were 2 segments to that race because it got red flagged because the rain got so incredibly bad and people started to fall off. In the end, it was Dovizioso with the win by 2.7 over Alex Rins on the Suzuki. Pol Espargaro, third on a KTM. We're going to talk about that in a second. There's so many great stories coming out this weekend. Then it was Michele Pirro, the test rider for the Ducati team. His best result in 4th. Pedrosa in his final race in 5th. Nakagami, one of his best results in 6th. Zarco 7th. Bradley Smith in 8th. Good result for Bradley in his final run on the KTM. Stefan Bradl, top 10. Then Hafid Sirene in 10th. Scott Redding Lorenzo in 12th. Valentino Rossi in 13th after crashing out of a podium spot. Then Carol Abraham and Jordi Torres. And the list of finishers is long and distinguished. So,
Yeah.
Do I have any takeaways? It's so hard when you look at that last race of the year, I think, Jason, to come up with a lot of takeaways, because on Tuesday, everything changed. But red flag for me with Valentino Rossi, the fact that he was on a podium spot and he threw it away again 2 in a row, that's got to ding your confidence, even though you're his age. Been around a long time, with experience, but it was also wet. It was wet. Unbelievable high.
But let's talk about that, though, real quick, right? Because you bring up Rossi, and I know it's something that you and I have discussed. You got to remember, he was trying to get top 3 in the championship. And when Spanyalas already crashed out in that first thing and didn't make the restart, Rossi was guaranteed 3rd in the championship regardless. So essentially, we talked last week about how his winning streak and obviously Sepang, he was right there. He's leading with 4 laps to go. How ironic is it that he crashed with 4 laps to go in this event as well? But, in those conditions, you and I both know how easy it is to make a small error, a small mistake. And if you really watch the video of him crashing, it didn't really look like he did anything specifically wrong. It wasn't like it was like some gigantic mistake, because you saw a number of riders crash in that turn over the course of that race. The conditions were so bad, but he was still pushing, trying to get himself that victory. It looked like for Dovey that when they restarted that race, it looked a little bit easier. I know he made comments that he put new tires on and all that. And I'm pretty sure that most of the guys would have done that. That said, Rossi.
There was no. There was no allotment left, so everybody was out of allotment. So the question a lot of people had, or where did Dovizioso get those soft tires? And they chalked it down to good management by the Ducati team in the end.
Yeah, that's great, and you could really tell that he definitely had the pace, and it looked like he was riding hard, but you never really saw that bike get out of shape too much, did you? Dovey was pretty much as solid as they come, but I hear the banter about Rossi and this and that, and I'm not quite on that bandwagon yet of the guy's done. Look, the guy's still finishing top 3 and top 5 most weekends. He's in the running for the podium.
Plus he was winless this year, and in those conditions he was so close to the front. Maybe it was that he was just pushing hard because he wanted that win. Sure, yeah.
But how about Rins? Like, he is honestly. Rins is my dark horse for next year. If I had let's say a dark horse, I still think that Marquez is going to be the guy. I think that no matter what anybody does, until somebody beats him, like outright beats him week in and week out, and I see the kid having to push enough to where he's tossing it down the road again, I don't think that there's a reason for anybody to think that Marquez is not going to win the championship. And I don't want to crown him this early, but you know what I'm saying.
If shoulder surgery goes well in December.
Yeah. And it will.
Which you have to say it will, right? But I'm just saying anything can happen. We've seen people, not bounce back from injury, but you have to think he would. If that goes well, then I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
But the kid would detach his arm probably and still be able to come out and try to figure out a way to ride a motorcycle. The thing is that when you look at Rins, and I know that we talked, but the guy from halfway season on, the only people that scored more points than him was Dovey and Marquez. And the thing I think I loved the most about my biggest takeaway from the MotoGP race was the fact that he jumps out to a 6.5-second lead in that first stage when the conditions were poor. And as the conditions got worse, it would have been very easy for a guy who'd never won a Grand Prix before and had been close to doing well to see 6.5 seconds on your board. It would be really easy to think, I got to keep pushing. I got to win this race. I got to do what I need to do. But as the conditions worsened, he had a couple wake-up calls. And instead of crashing, and this story of you and I talking right now being hey, Rins was doing really good until, I thought it was very mature of him to back off, let those leaders catch him. Once they caught him, they didn't go anywhere. All three of those guys were together, meaning Rossi and Dovi and him. I thought it was a very mature ride by a young man who hasn't won a MotoGP race yet, that had it right basically in the palm of his hands. It was just a shame that the conditions worsened, because I think if the race had stayed green and the race had stayed the way it was, I think that Rins would have won his first Grand Prix of the season. But unfortunately, with the conditions getting as bad as it was, they had to red flag the race.
Yeah, good point. Let's move on to Moto2 real quick. In the Moto2 race, what we saw was a leader with a big lead, throw it down the road. The results were Miguel Oliveira wins it by 13.2 seconds over your boy, Iker Lecuona, and Alex Marquez back on the podium. Bassini, Remy Gardner with the top 5, which was good. And you see the exit of a bunch of riders in this one, Binder, Lowe's, Joe Roberts out on that one as well. What were your impressions of the Moto2 race, being a final race for a few of these riders?
Well, yeah, for sure. And seeing Oliveira do what he did, people call it picking up the pieces. In those races, you've got to be there you've really got to be there. I think one of the things I take away is we speak all the time about Rossi and, the last couple rounds, how he tipped over. I kind of wonder what's going on with Alex Marquez, because if Alex Marquez had a different last name, we probably wouldn't even be talking about him. Or I hear people and the hate that they have for him, and he's not doing this, and he gets beat by his teammates. And there's probably a tremendous amount of pressure on that young man. And yeah, he crashed again leading this weekend. He picked it up, still got third, which was great. But Greg, where do you think that he would be in the realm of talk if he was a Miguel Oliveira or one of these other guys that wins races occasionally? Unfortunately, that didn't happen for him this year. But what do you think goes to his mind when he's skiddling on the ground? Because when they showed his pit box and you saw his dad looked like, oh my gosh, this is devastating. And the rest of the team kind of looked in the background like, kind of expected it to happen. I think he's in a very difficult spot.
Yeah, I think the last name comes with a lot of pressure, and I think it continues to mount because of the success of his brother. It's not as he just continues winning. So, caught in the shadow, Alex Marquez, I think he's just, I don't know. I mean, he's struggling. He's definitely struggling. The guy, I don't envy his position, because he has had some success. And I think people are going like, okay, you're the younger brother, like you should be faster than your brother. You've been chasing him all your life.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things in that, by the way, Jason. There's a lot of family things. You look at Nicky Hayden chasing Tommy Hayden his whole life. Nicky, the second oldest of the boys, was arguably the faster, definitely, went to a higher level than Tommy. Freddie Spencer, he had his older brother who dirt tracked, and he chased him. There's a lot of, stories of that. You could even make the argument that Kenny Roberts Jr. was chasing his dad. Yeah, it's a dad's son, but still they rode together. And so oftentimes we see in motorsport, the second oldest is usually the faster of the two. In this particular case, it's not, and it seems to be a bit of pressure. But I don't know for Alex Marquez. I don't know what the future holds for him, but I know for 2019, it's not a MotoGP ride.
Well, I think though that it might be a really good time. He might be in the best spot in the sense that with the Triumph coming in next year, the new motors, new everything, it might be a good little change up for him. It's same team again, yes, but with some new stuff coming in, new manufacturer providing the motors and things, it might be just what he needs to kind of change things up a little bit. And he's with an experienced team, with an experienced crew, and it could be a an opportunity for him to try to shine next year with the new power plant underneath him, and it almost like I feel like a start over, So I'm kind of rooting for the guy.
So let's talk Moto3 because Moto3 was absolutely spectacular. A lot of records were broken by a very young rider, Can Oncu, who is Turkish. He became the first Turkish MotoGP winner. He was the first wild card rider to win his first debut race since 1991. You have more on that, but he's the youngest GP winner at ever, 15 years and 115 days old. Now, a lot of people may be asking themselves, wait a second, I thought you had to be 16 years old to race in MotoGP, period. And that is true. However, the FIM made an exemption because Can won the Red Bull Rookies Cup this year. They allowed him a wild card ride for the final race of the season. He starts that, and next thing you know, blammo, he's in. And by the way, Jason, just to kind of put some perspective on 15 years and 115 days, he was born July 26, 2003.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
So, for your old. But, I mean, how incredible of a performance was that from this young Turkish rider?
Well, it was incredible up until about 6 turns or 7 turns from the end when he almost pitched it.
But almost, come on, man.
Hey, it was incredible no matter how you look at it, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, what he did there. He beat the world champion, Jorge Martin, and Dizzy Antonio finished third in that race for the Del Conca team to go first and second overall in the championship. This kid came out and beat him at 15 years old. I believe Redding was the youngest up until that point at the British Grand Prix. So the fact that he did what he did, and he looked so poised doing it, and oh, by the way, he's got a twin brother. They don't look like twins at all, but he has a twin brother that is signed also next year with Akeoyo's team. He signed both of them, and apparently Daniel, his brother, beat him more than not this last season. So it's a really interesting dynamic that you're gonna. Again, we were just talking about brothers and that kind of thing. Chan's got a brother that's right behind him right now, but to go 1-for-1 at the final race of the year, where does the kid go from there? That's the hard thing. Is like, how do you now you just want to duplicate that every single time out.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of pressure for that young man. But I've seen interviews with the two of them.
Yep.
And his brother, Dennis, I think is his name.
Dennis, I'm sorry. I said Daniel, didn't I? It's Dennis.
Dennis, yeah.
Yep.
With a Z on the end.
That's right.
Can is actually like 5 minutes younger.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny, but Jan's also like almost twice the height, Yeah. I know that Dennis won the 2017 Asia Cup as a championship, actually on a race where Can won that last race in 2017. So these young Turkish riders, who, by the way, are influenced by Kenan Safoglu, who we know is unbelievable racer at the World Superbike, World Supersport level. He has connections with those guys that you're absolutely right. You come out there and you come from Rookies Cup and you're doing lap times and you just find yourself at the front. And I think oftentimes, even at 15 years old, whether you're incredibly mature for your age or not, you kind of don't realize what's happening, I think, at that point. Meaning, like, you're going like, wow, this is great. I'm doing fast lap times. The reality is going to hit you when you're actually in the race and you're doing, you're out front and you're seeing on your pit board that Jorge Martin is 4 seconds behind you.
Yeah.
So the team that he has signed for is the team that he raced for, which is that Red Bull KTM. Team. So I didn't realize his brother, because the FIM sent out an entry list for Moto3 next year, and his brother's not on that list. So I didn't.
Yeah, he's in with the same group though. I think he might not be racing it next year. He might be doing. I can't remember if he's doing CEV, but it's all under the same umbrella. And because
I think he's doing CEV because
IO signed them both up.
Yeah. So it'll be very interesting to see if the pressure of being the youngest racer ever to win a MotoGP race is going to affect his program moving forward. And some of that pressure would come from the media, without question, because they're going to latch onto that story. and be like, where's Jan? Where's Jan Onju? Where's Jan Onju? Where's Jan Onju? Because he won that race. He won that race. But the real test is going to be when conditions are perfect,
Yep.
and you have an entire race weekend of perfect, meaning you're going to have all the practice sessions and qualifiers in the dry.
New
Everyone gets
tracks.
new tracks, yeah.
Yep.
Which he did mention. Jan did mention that he is going to do track days. He's going to go to as
Yep.
many tracks as he can in this off season to try to learn them. And so that's a good thing. I think he's got a good strategy moving forward. Every test he can do with the team, plus go do some track days, which, the value of track days and getting track time in motorcycle road racing is incredible, is it not? I mean,
Oh my
incredible.
gosh. When I went to Valencia 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was there, took a group of friends. We went and rode Aragon and we rode Valencia. Guess who was there for both those days, ripping around on an R6?
Oh.
Johan Zarco was
Mhm.
there 2 days, ripping around both tracks, and super cool guy too. And now I sit there and I'm watching him this morning, on the KTM, and I'm saying to myself, he's still riding, he's still at Valencia, So watching him go around there was good. And getting on with that, Greg, did get up this morning. I did watch some of the Valencia test. I caught myself up on it a little bit yesterday, although I know the weather wasn't so good towards the last couple hours of yesterday. A lot of hype. I mean, so healthy is this championship right now that I think, there was tons of spectators there. The pit lane looked like a Grand Prix already with the amount of photographers in there. Obviously, they got a little bit more accessibility on the tests. Looking at the takeaways from the test over the last 2 days, there was some big news that I think that I was looking forward to. I was really looking to see how Lorenzo looked on that Honda, and just the early takeaways. How much smaller does that Honda look looking at Lorenzo on that bike than the Ducati that he just got off of? I mean, it really seemed, when I looked at him on that bike, he looked like a giant compared to what he did on the Ducati. And you could tell the Honda's probably obviously been designed around some smaller stature guys with Pedrosa and Marquez. But I thought it was a very positive 2 days for a guy who we know is injured right now, Lorenzo, to only end up, what was it, Greg? Like, I think he was only 0.8 off this morning. That said, I thought it was pretty encouraging for him to be as close as he was on that Honda.
There's no doubt. But let me back up a little bit before we start that talk, because what I
Yeah.
want to do is really address the changes that are happening in the MotoGP paddock and
Oh
the
my
20
gosh, so many of
25
them.
riders. Yeah. So
Yeah.
looking at the entry list, here's the situation. Of the 22 riders that are registered right now to race in MotoGP for 2019, there are only 11 riders returned of those 22 to the seats that they occupied from the year before. Okay, so that's going to be Dovizioso on the Ducati team. You have, let's see, going down the list, Maverick Vinales. You have Nakagami, Cal Crutchlow, who wasn't at this test, Alicia Spargaro, Alex Rins, Jack Miller, Pola Spargaro, still on the
Rossi.
KTM,
Yep.
Valentino, Tino
Yep.
Rabat, and Mark Marquez. Now, so you have 7 riders that are on either new teams or new bikes. So, and I say that because you have that Tectois team that has changed from Yamaha to KTM. All right. So
Yep.
those riders are going to be that have either switched teams or bikes are going to be Johan Zarco. He's on the Red Bull KTM
Yep.
factory team now. You have Danilo Petrucci, who moves up to the factory team. You have Carol Abraham, who moves to the Real Avinta racing team. Andrea Iannone goes to Aprilia. You have Hafid Sirene, who goes to the Red Bull KTM Tech 3. And then you have Jorge Lorenzo moving to Repsol. And included in all that are 4 rookies. You have Quattararo on the Petronas Yamaha SRT. Oh, sorry, Franco Morbidelli also moved over to the Petronas Yamaha team. Then you have Bagnaia, Oliveira, and Joan Mir. So you're talking about basically half of the paddock, the way it was on Sunday, was completely changed by the time we got to Tuesday.
Yep.
Now you throw in 2 days of testing, and yes, I think the thing on everyone's mind had to be, what did Jorge Lorenzo think of the Honda? However, we know that Jorge is under a gag order, so he can't say anything about the differences between the Ducati and the Hondas. And we've seen this time and time again over the years, haven't we, Jay?
Oh yeah, and I think the fact that Ducati let him test is great. I know in the past there's been some riders that have switched, and it's been a little bit more hostile between the team that they were leaving and obviously going on to something else. So I think it's cool that they let Lorenzo kind of out of his deal and go and test the bike. I thought his kit looked great too. I thought that the kind of the red and black livery that he had. I thought it looked really, really good. In fact,
it was actually like a reddish orange, and he posted something, orange is the new black, and I was like, yeah, definitely. It looked good.
It looked great. I thought it looked great, and I thought he looked good on the bike. I think the guy who I'm really, really happy to see do so well, and there's some real – all year long we heard about kind of how the non-factory Hondas were very difficult to ride. We've heard it from Miller in the years past and how they weren't that great. Morbidelli just jumps on the Yamaha and right off the bat, 5th quickest. I think he ended it today.
6th quickest. Yeah. So let's go over that real quick.
Yeah.
So the fastest. Let's go combined because
do combined for me. Yeah.
So combined, Maverick Vinales was the fastest, a 130.7. And oh, by the way, the first 6 riders that I'm going to mention were all under the 2016 track record set by Lorenzo, which was a 131.1. So Vinales, a 130.7, Dovizioso, a 130.89, Marquez was third at a 130.9. Jack Miller was only 200ths behind him in 4th. Petrucci was 5th, just another 200ths behind Miller, and then Franco Morbidelli on that Petronas Yamaha at a 130.9. So all those 6 riders faster than the fastest time recorded, which was in 16. Then you had Rins, Nakagami, like you're talking about, Rossi in 9th, Espargaro in 10th, Aleix, and then Bagnaia, which was our first of our rookies, in 11th, Lorenzo in 12th spot, and like you were mentioning, Jason, only 0.827 off. So he did a 131.5. That's only 0.4 off of the record that he set in 2016, right? So you look at that, and then you have Pol Espargaro, the first of our KTMs, Joan Mir, then you had Tito Rabat 15th. Stefan Bradl was in the mix. He only tested actually yesterday. Quartararo was in there on that Petronas Yamaha in 17th, Iannone 18th, Piero 19th, test rider. Folger in 20th. Good to see him back. He's now the official Yamaha team test rider. So Jonas Folger is back. If you remember his ruckus at the beginning of this year. Johan Zarco, 20th spot.
I got to think that is the one, Greg. That's the one that's probably got to hurt the most. If there's a guy laying there awake tonight that can't sleep, it's probably going to be him. That's just my feeling on it, is the struggles that he had. He crashed twice today. If you watched, he was the first one on track yesterday, about pitched it away on his 3rd lap on the bike.
I saw that, on the rain tires,
and on the rain tires. And the funny, it's not funny, the sad part is I know how I really rate Zarco. I do. I think he's an incredible rider, but it just kind of goes to show, doesn't it? Like, we say it all the time. If you get the right pieces of the puzzles put together, and this is only just the first test, but you got a guy like Morbidelli who was 10th and further back for most of the year. He was rookie of the year this year, and all that. But all of a sudden he gets on a bike that might be a little bit easier to ride. He's on either Rossi or Lorenzo's bike, Rossi or Vinales' bike from this past year, they said. And he's right off the bat, he's 6th and looking really comfortable doing it. Like, didn't look like it was a big effort. I think the other takeaways, when you just look at this top 5 guys, I think Miller being ahead of Petrucci, yes, it's only 200ths of a second, but I think Miller's fighting for himself right now, and I think that he knows he's got to beat Bagnaia all year. Bagnaia coming off Moto2 championship. If Bagnaia goes out and has an incredible season on that Ducati, there's every chance that if Petrucci slips up or doesn't quite get the results that the factory wants, that you could see that seat filled next year by Bagnaia or Miller. And I think for Miller, that was a big effort for him today. He did it following Marquez with about an hour left in the test. He got hooked into Marquez, and that's when they both ran their quickest times. But I think that C. Miller ahead of Petrucci is going to be a big thing for him. I thought Petrucci did a good job to be where he's at. I think it goes without saying. And I don't know, how do you feel about it? I mean, Petrucci kind of limped his way onto that ride. What are your expectations of him, moving forward? Like, what do you think about Petrucci?
I think me setting my expectation of Petrucci, which really I didn't have high hopes for him being solidly in the top 5, honestly. And so I think that he outperformed my expectation. I think that, it's a question of, is the shiny object shiniest right now, because he's really amped. He's excited to be in the Ducati factory team colors. And, once we get into the grind of testing and mid-season, is he going to be able to maintain that enthusiasm and stick with it and bring that energy to every single race, and practice session. I think that's really going to be the question for me at this point. But it's so early to tell, Jason,
It is
as what's
just
going to happen.
2 days.
Yeah, what people need to realize is that the majority of this test for most of these manufacturers, there were some chassis bits and electronics tested, but the biggest and most important thing for this test is the engines, because
Yeah.
the engines are sealed as we get to the beginning of the season, and it takes time to build a certain configuration, and they've got to really sort all this out by mid-January, or else they're going to be stuck with bad motors for the entire season. And
Correct.
so, having Marquez, having Lorenzo, who were injured, test, it wasn't about necessarily an outright fastest lap time. For Lorenzo, it was about getting used to the bike. For the other guys, it was about the test. But for me, I mean, if you're Tito Rabat, okay, Tito Rabat
Yep.
finished 15th. He was 1.1 seconds off. They had to put him on the bike a la Miguel Duhamel at Daytona kind of thing.
What a
And
stud.
like, that's what I'm thinking.
Seriously. What a stud. I mean, the guy couldn't, when he tried to get on the bike the first time, he was trying to get on the bike from the right side, and his right leg's the one that was broke. And he couldn't support himself enough to swing his left leg over. So he had to walk around to the other side of the bike just to swing his leg over. And to be what was it, Greg? 1.2, 1.1?
1.1,
off?
yeah.
1.1 off after sitting there. And I mean, the guy was walking on a broken femur a week later, a week and a half after I saw on his Instagram, he was already walking. I mean, it literally made me a bigger fan of his, because it goes without saying again that you got with the wrong team, or you got with a team that doesn't have all the resources. That's why when we talk right now about Petrucci, we saw what Batista did on that bike. And one of the things he said, he's like, behind the scenes, I have 2 guys at my team now. Behind the scenes, when I'm on the factory bike, I have 8 guys behind the scenes. So nothing really goes unturned. And when you look at like a Tito Rabat and him coming back and doing as absolutely great as he did, he's got to be feeling great, knowing that he's got another couple of months to get himself better. But I think my takeaways, just closing out this little segment, are for sure Morbidelli doing great. And we didn't talk about him much, but Nakagami as well on the Honda, on a latest version of the Honda, to be 8th. I thought that was pretty incredible for him too, and hopefully good things for him to come.
Well, and Jason, the Nicky Hayden Endurance Award definitely go, which I just made up, by the way, because
nice.
if you watch Nicky, like if you go back and he always did more laps, right? Like more laps than anyone else. That goes to Nakagami. Nakagami logged in 68 laps today, and the next closest guy was Jack Miller at 63. A lot of riders did in the 50s. Marquez doing 39, Dovizioso 39. So, Nakagami serious about, and loving, by the way, going from the 2017 Honda to the 2018, which he noted more improvements in the tires. Now, one of the things about the weekend, Jason, is we have a new technical partner here at the Greg's Garage Pod with Jason and Greg, which is Arai Helmets. And one of the things that in talking with those guys about it was, helmet technology. And what we saw this weekend from Valencia, and what we saw a little bit on the first day of testing on Tuesday, was the rain conditions, Jay. And so, you have a lot of racing experience, especially endurance. I have a lot of racing experience, and wanted to talk about vision, because there was a lot of conversation about being in the spray and being able to see around it, or just in those miserable conditions about shields fogging up. And I mean, first of all, it's a ridiculous question to ask, but I'm going to just ask it anyway. How important is it for you as a motorcycle racer to be able to see clearly? And that goes for clear visors, dark visors, whatever. Is it not the most critical thing out there, right?
There's no question. I think first thing you do is it's comfort, and you're only comfortable if you can really see what's going on. It is amazing how much your focus or your concentration level can be kind of skewed by, even if you have a hair that's just kind of dangling in front of one of your eyes. It's so hard to try to explain to people how hard your focus can be. And when you're sitting on a bike for an hour, like in World Endurance, and the conditions can change, there's nothing more frustrating than if you're in the middle of a session and it starts to rain, and all of a sudden you maybe your helmet's not sealed or whatever. You get a little drip of rain or something, or a little bit of water come down the inside of your visor. It distracts you and takes so much attention away. And when you look at the conditions that they had on the weekend, and you saw the crashes that some of the guys had, I mean, the amount of crashes were incredible. Some might even argue that race should have been stopped a little bit earlier because of how bad it got. But that's when you really rely on making sure that you have the good vision, that things aren't fogging up. I mean, Lorenzo switched helmet brands 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because he had a helmet that kept fogging up and he couldn't fix it, couldn't figure out why. And it doesn't really matter what you get paid to do something. If you can't go out and do your job the way you need to be able to do it, it definitely makes things a lot more difficult. So yeah, Greg, of course, vision's everything for us, but having the confidence in your equipment and that it's going to be okay in adverse conditions like that are everything to riders.
Well, when I was talking to Arai about the technical part of, those specific conditions, the rain, or even in a very high humid conditions, I was like, what are your solutions to this? And they were like, we have a double pane shield. And I said, well, okay, that makes sense, and like you're saying, making sure it's nice and sealed. But also, Arai actually has rain tear-offs. And the interesting thing in talking with Jeff Wheel from Arai about it is that this actually came out of something that happened here in the States. A number of years ago when Roger Hayden was racing, I think it was the Jordan team, but I know it was at Roadrace and it was in the rain. Someone had a motor blow up in front of him, and the entire race in the rain, the motor didn't affect the actual surface, but the motor blew and they were able to get the bike off the track, Jay. But he had oil on his visor the entire time in the rain. So Arai decided to come up with a solution for that, and that's rain tear-offs. And the key to that is making sure that those tear-offs, just like your visor, are sealed all the way around the edges. Plus, there's a special wax that they use that they actually put wax on those tear-offs to allow for that rain to bead off. So just bead off, just in case you ever had a situation where you have to pull a tear off in the rain. Have you ever had a situation where you've been in a race and you thought, man, I wish I had a tear off right now? I mean, I know that riding in the rain on the track, if you get on a straightaway, if there's a lot of water on the visor, I would turn my head from side to side a little bit, to try to clear the visor off. But other than that, I've never raced in the rain with a tear off. Have you had that opportunity before, or can you at least see the applicability of it?
I can definitely see it, especially if the conditions get so bad, and if you do have a case like what it sounds like Roger had, in the sense of some oil being on the track. I can't imagine anything worse than that. Having oil on your visor in sprinkly or rainy conditions. Generally, the worst part, Greg, is when you've put a tear off or two on. I never really like to have a bunch of tear offs on.
No, I know a lot like just in the dry, you mean, in general?
Yeah, in the dry in general. But man, it always seemed like you'd pull that tear off and the one that you had, and within 30 seconds you had something splatter on your visor and just right across your eyes, right? Always seemed like that.
Yeah.
But again, this goes to the forefront of technology and even what Arai is doing there as far as developing a shield or a tear-off system that's going to work even in rainy conditions, to be able to accommodate if something weird like that was to happen. So I think it's all the time they're doing new things with the helmets and
Jason, a lot of people don't think about it often, right? They just go, oh, just put it on or whatever. But the other thing that's interesting to me is how I like to ride with a clear shield, right?
Always,
all right,
weirdo.
And well, I just don't wear sunglasses or anything. But I also like to ride when Arai had a yellow. Remember the yellow shields that they had? Well, the reason they don't make those available anymore is actually because of World Endurance. They think, no one really has any information, but they think that there was a fatality caused in World Endurance a few years ago because when the red lights would come on indicating a red flag, the yellow lens or the yellow visor would actually show that light in a different color other than red.
It gets brighter too. That's the whole purpose of that shield, was to brighten things up a little bit. So if you had a day where it was a bit dark and it looked like it was getting gloomy or rainy, it was a way of brightening things up a little bit. So that was the main reason for that.
And I've noticed that Maverick Vinales has had a shield. I've noticed some photos that in inclement conditions where it hasn't quite been clear. So I'm thinking to myself that maybe Arai's working on something new, maybe a different color tint. I know they can't or don't want to go back to the yellow because I bug those guys all the time. Hey, I used to have a yellow shield. Can I get another one? They're like, no, stop asking. And I won't.
You're not going to get that.
Yeah.
So off subject, really. But what is the deal with you and clear visors? Like, why can't you use a dark visor? Why are you so strange, Greg?
I don't know exactly. I just like to see as clearly as I possibly can. And I know at the beginning of the segment, I asked a really dumb question, like how important is vision to us? But I have a reason for that question. There was a rider. Do you remember a guy named Kevin Rensell?
Of course. Had glasses. Kevin always always had his glasses on.
Exactly. Always had his glasses on. But Kevin actually, while he was racing, He told me the story a few years ago when I saw him again at one of the AMA Superbike races. He was actually legally blind, and
Wow.
he could barely see out of his eyes, and he would race like that. And
Mm-hmm.
he knew these tracks in the Southeast, like Talladega, Road Atlanta, all these tracks that we used to frequent in the Southeast so well. He would look for just a little visual cue, like a blur that would go by that would indicate for him that it was time to break. Okay,
Yep.
so all I'm saying is of course we all sit there and say, well, duh, Greg, you want clear vision, but not everyone in the world has great vision when they ride. Some people have contact lenses that they can't run, so they go with blurry vision. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but having that clear visor, I think, is important. And it was neat from listening to the technical aspects that Arai gave us on just dealing with the rain. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and I know that vision is so key. Even riding in dusty or whatever kind of conditions, it's just you've got to be able to see what you're doing. You've got to be able to stay focused. Renzel stories. I mean, there's so many guys back in the day that used to put up with so much more, but as technology's gotten better, it's definitely made it a lot easier for people.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit more, Greg. We got something coming up next year that I've kind of started to show a little bit more interest towards. But MotoE is coming to the paddock next year, and I know it's only a 5-round series. But when you start to look at some of the names that have signed up for this, it kind of gets your attention. And we're talking about riders that are coming from all facets. As far as we've got riders that have been in MotoGP before, been in Moto2 before. We've got guys from World Endurance. We got guys from World Superbike. We have Maria Herrera, who I'm really eager to see how she does. I think she is going to surprise a lot of people next year. I mean, we just saw Ana Carrasco win the Super Sport 300 World Championship this past season. But when you start looking at, and we got guys like Bradley Smith, who literally just got done racing MotoGP and who are currently testing for one of the big teams, he's jumped into MotoE. So I know you got a list of the riders. Share with us a couple of the riders you got.
All right. So obviously for those that are kind of going MotoE,
Yep.
it's pretty simple. They're electric bikes. Okay.
Yep,
and I'll give you the description of the bikes and what they're doing. But here's a list that we got from the FIM recently of those riders. Josh Hook, Australian, right? He's going to be in the Alma Pramac team.
World Endurance champion right now. He's actually World Endurance. Yep.
Oh, he is. Yeah. World Endurance, right.
Yep.
He's a stud. Alex DeAngelis, as everyone knows him from San Marino. He's also on that Alma Pramac racing team. Maria Herrera, like you mentioned. Nicholas Terrell, back at it on the Angel Nieto team. Simone is in the mix. A guy named Eric Grando from Brazil. That's the Aventia team. Randy DiPune back in action on the LCR-E team with Nicola Canepa. So he's back, the Italian.
You look at those two guys, Greg. DiPune right now is racing Kawasaki in World Endurance. Canepa's been a Yamaha test rider. You go to Eric Granado, who you just mentioned. I just watched a video that somebody sent. Remember when you and I talked about Alex Barros last week in our podcast? I had someone send me a video actually of Granado racing against Barros in the final round of the Brazilian Championship. Guys were going at it at the final round, and it was Granado was right there. So again, keep going. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, no. Yeah. You have Hector Garza's in the mix on the Tech 3 e-racing team. Kenny Ferre, I think you know Kenny.
Yeah, right? World Endurance guy again. Yeah.
Matteo Ferrari's in it. Lorenzo Salvadori is going to be doing it.
World Superbike from this year, right?
Yeah. Jessica Raffin from Sweden. The Dynavolt, that'll be a single rider team. Nikki Tulli from Finland is in it. Mike DeMiglio. So we know Mike. I mean, wasn't he in the video game, the MotoGP video game with when Cameron Bobier was in there?
I think he was, yeah. I mean, Nikki Tulli, who you just mentioned, was having an incredible ride this weekend in Moto2. Yeah. And he's going to find himself on a seat next year in this,
Bradley Smith, and of course, Sete Gibernau back in the saddle for the Pons team. I love seeing that.
Isn't it
and
great?
Even the 658 Squadra Corsa team is getting in with Matteo and Casati. So there's a list of those riders. So MotoE is very interesting, Jason, because as we look at MotoE, here's the thing. They're 2019 Energica Ego Corsa motorcycles. Okay, so these motorcycles have a battery capacity of 20 kilowatts, and the power that they make is 120 kilowatts which roughly translates to around 160 horsepower. They're saying that the maximum speed on these things are going to be 270 kilometers per hour. That's 168 miles an hour. I'm kind of looking at this as kind of a hyped up 600 in a way, you know. They're going to have Brembo brakes, Olean suspension. The cool thing is that in keeping with, you know, the whole MotoE format, you know, the electronic stuff, is they're actually going to have these remote charging solar panels that'll be deployed. So the bikes will be charged via solar panels. I think that's really cool.
I think
So you're not going to be pulling amps from the actual racetrack itself. The cool thing is they already have a testing schedule, right? So then the first test, official test, is going to be November 23rd, 24th, and 25th coming up at Jerez. And they already have a schedule of when that's going to be. Their free practices will start at 11 o'clock in the morning local time, and and so on. So they're going to have that test in November. They'll have another test 13th through the 15th in March, and then another test 23rd through the 25th in April. Their first race alongside of the MotoGP World Championship, like you said, will be 5 events. They're all going to be in Europe. They'll be at Jerez in May 5th, Le Mans the 19th of May, Sachsenring the 7th of July, Austria on the 11th of August, and Misano, they're actually going to have 2 races on the 15th of September. So a decent little championship and incredible riders. It's going to be very interesting to see, since it's a spec series class, some of these younger riders, that are kind of on the uptick, or those endurance riders, plus some of those, what are we going to call Sete? A wily veteran?
Maybe? Gotta call him something. I mean, I look, this, if I'm being honest, this stuff just didn't interest me at all. It just, I know I'm going to sound like some old school guy, like so many others, but I go to the races. I want to hear these things. I love the sound of motorcycles going around a racetrack. I think the MotoGP bikes sound cool. I was trackside, literally almost could like touch the track at Portimao and World Superbike this year. Listening to the Ducati and the Kawi, I mean, it kind of gets in your blood, listening to the bikes. The thing that's got me interested about this is the bike itself. I've had a good look at it. I think Colin wrote it at Coda. That the bike itself looks pretty cool. It's got a lot of great pieces on it. But I think
on display at Coda too at all the races. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and they've been putting a lot of like legend type guys on the bikes to ride it. But it's really the people that are going to ride them. I think it's very interesting that it's kind of got such a diverse group of people from all different series that are all going to come and ride basically a spec bike. And I think it's neat that we got all these different people coming from all these, we got World 300 Supersport with Maria Herrera, and World Endurance, and Moto2 and MotoGP, legends that have been there before. I think more than anything, that's what's got me kind of intrigued. So it's going to make me sit on the fence and try to watch it. Even though it's going to be quiet, it's going to be fun.
Fine. You know what? I'm going to sit on the fence with you. And then during that entire race, I'll just sit next to your ear and go, burn, burn. Or maybe this. There you go. That's what I'll do. Great. I'll make those noises in your ear.
Yeah, that would be.
All right, Jason, let's transition from MotoGP. Let's get to MotoAmerica real quick. Wanted to button up something from last week quickly, which was we told you that a press release was coming out Friday about Supersport National Champion JD Beach. If you didn't listen to our last podcast, JD Beach announced a full schedule of flat track in the United States on a Yamaha. He's going to miss 2 events because he's committed to the entire MotoAmerica season. So the press release came out that he'll be riding for Ridiculous Racing. And while I had that interview with him last week, I did ask him about it. And here is JD's comments about his road racing plans. Ridiculous Racing in the Supersport class, defending his number 1 plate for 2019.
Yeah, so it's going to be really cool riding for the Ridiculous racing team in the super sport class again. They stepped up this year, and they had a really good team, and my roommate, housemate, whatever you want to call it, Hayden Gilliam was really quick and pushed me all season. So I mean, I know they have really good bikes, and it's going to be a lot of work for me this year because I will be racing the full Moto America season plus racing American flat track. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really glad to be riding for the ridiculous team. And yes, it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think the thing there too to add that he didn't at the time was that he gets to keep his crew chief John Ethel with him, who was really pivotal in getting that a good championship winning bike underneath JD.
Wow, and that team just keeps getting stronger. It's tremendous. I mean, Ridiculous came in this a couple years ago, and this year, like we've talked about so much, they really stepped up the program. And it's great that JD stuck around. I think it would have been a real shame had we not been able to enjoy watching him ride at the MotoAmerica rounds. The fact that John Ethel's going with him is great too. They obviously formed a good team, and I think for JD, coming from where he's been the last however many years with Yamaha under the factory kind of banner, it's going to be important that he has somebody like John Ethel who was with him just this year and understands some of his nuances. They've won a championship together. And it, I'm sure the bikes are going to be every bit as good as they were when he was riding for Yamaha, just in some different colors. So we'll see, but I'm excited. I'm excited that he's going to be back. I think it's going to be a fun year watching JD do both series. And I'm glad we didn't lose him at MotoAmerica. This week, Greg, there's been a lot of things going on social media this week, as far as the MotoAmerica Championship. And as sad as it is, I hate to see the Road Racing Factory team send out the press release earlier this week about their not going to be joining us in the Superbike category or any category for that matter in our series. We're hearing rumors of Chuck Graves out. I don't feel like Chuck Graves is going anywhere. He's going to be somewhere in our paddock. But, I read what people say, and I'm just like everybody else. I got my opinions on certain things. I don't see it as bad as it is. I mean, do you really feel like it's time to panic yet? It's November.
No, I don't. I think that's exactly why, Jason, because it's November. I think that there's a lot of things that are changing, a lot of people reprioritizing their lives after a long season. And I just think that we see this, these things happen. It's horrible that the Broaster Chicken Honda team is no longer in. It's horrible that Honda is not going to have a Superbike. At least right now, there's no Superbike planned for Honda. I have heard a rumor, and I do have a call into Honda about this. The rumor is that Honda still wants to be in the series in 2020, and they're going to come back with a stronger team. So a lot of people, I think, are saying Honda's out. That's it. Superbike racing's collapsing. I don't see it like that. Yeah. Cameron Peterson lost his ride, but he has another ride with Omega. What we are losing is a semi, no doubt about it. Will that semi, will someone else bring one in? I don't know. There's been a loss of if Graves is no longer around, that semi's gone. I've heard the Yamaha Hospitality semi's gone. So we're losing some of the look and feel of the paddock, but I don't think we're losing anything on the grid at the moment.
Well, let's think about what you just said. Everybody keeps talking about the Graves thing gone. Look, JD was the only rider under one of the trucks. They had a semi going around essentially with JD in it, and he's gone over to Ridiculous Racing. So we haven't lost a rider in the sense that, okay, we have one less semi in the rig, but in the pits. The hospitality thing now, they'll be able to condense their hospitality because they'll have their two riders riding Superbike, and then I'm assuming, would condense their hospitality on one other side, like Yosh does.
Yosh does, yeah. Yeah, that's what I think the plan would be. Yeah.
So when I hear that stuff, I get it's not that big a deal. Like you say, Greg, we're not losing a rider. Cam Peterson, we know is going to a different team, so he's staying in the paddock. I think the real loss for me is the fact that we've got some incredible humans that great human beings that worked for Danny Walker and that whole Broaster Chicken team the last few years. But when you see what happened in World Superbike, where Ten Kate, who has been around the series forever, Honda, I think, is in a reorganizing position right now, where they are literally trying at this moment to reorganize how they're going to distribute their assets and build a better machine. Maybe their year with the new Althea Honda team in World Superbike being closer to HRC, maybe they'll have some things that they'll learn this year in that championship so that when they come back in 2020 to whatever capacity they do to MotoAmerica, they'll be a little bit more prepared. Right now, Greg, let's face it, their bike is not the best bike out there. It's the third best bike, fourth best bike out there. We don't have anybody running a Kawasaki here in America, which is just insanity to me. But we got the Suzuki and the Yamaha, and then kind of whoever else.
Well, yeah, to add to your point too, Jason, the rumblings from inside the industry, which I'm very privy to occasionally, is that Honda does have a new CBR 1000R that's on the way. There has been a little bit of a setback, and so they've pushed back that release date to 2020. So maybe that is part of what you're saying. Maybe that's part of that reorganization or that allocation, saying, look, do we spend the money to go back to racing and get the lack of results that we've had, or do we reorganize our efforts, save this year, and then go back strong with a brand new motorcycle and a year worth of development at the World Superbike level worth of data, along with the All Japan Road Race Series, along with the efforts they put into Suzuki 8-hour and endurance and things, and compile all that, then come to the States and really put in an effort? I mean, it sounds to me like that would be a smart thing to do.
And I agree with you. And everybody blames or wants to think it's a MotoAmerica problem. It's not. It's a worldwide issue right now. There's not rides. There's nothing available. There's so many good riders sitting on their hands right now. A lot of these teams don't have finances, and people think it's just in America. It's not. Like World Superbike right now, struggling. Even BSB, you got to bring money if you're going to go race. The fact is that in the rest of the world, motorcycle road racing is a much bigger deal. And it has been since day one. It's nothing new. Road racing in America went through a tremendous stage from like the early 90s to the mid 2000s. We were in this really good period, but there was times before that where the series was flat and it didn't have anything. I remember after my dad got done in the early 80s and stuff, road racing in America it just seemed like it was non-existent. A lot of our guys were going overseas. There's a lot of people that people don't really know of that went overseas that are big name guys that cut their teeth here, like Mike Baldwin and these guys. They went overseas and raced as well because the series here in America was struggling. You have to remember the people that are involved at MotoAmerica have already thought of the obvious reasons to make the championship better. And for whatever reason, there have been some reasons why maybe they can't make the obvious choice, so they've had to go another way. I know that Wayne and Chuck and those guys talk to all the manufacturers all the time. And what we need is it's just going to take, it might take something like Honda coming out with a brand new bike that all of a sudden we get that resurgence again. And that's what it's going to be.
And listen, Jason, I have it on very good authority that in the next couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, there's going to be an announcement from MotoAmerica about the 2019 television package. Okay. Yep. What I can tell you is that I don't know much about it other than to say that it's going to be an improvement over what you've seen before. And I think once people see what the TV package is going to be, that it's going to quell some of the people's panic, like, oh, the world is over, road racing's done, flat track's the thing, like whatever it is. So I'm hoping that. The other thing is that there's a little bit of a bright ray of sunlight in terms of personnel in the paddock. There is a really strong rumor, okay, that I'll know more about next week, but there's a strong rumor that PJ Jacobsen is going to be coming back on an HSBK Celtic Racing backed motorcycle. Now, at this point in time, I don't know the bike or the class that he's going to be competing in, but I have it on good authority that he's going to make his way back to the United States and compete in MotoAmerica. Real quick, Jason, because this one is, but your thoughts about PJ Jacobsen coming back to MotoAmerica? Is it a help? Is it a shot in the arm?
It's definitely a help. It's great. Having PJ around would be tremendous. It's just another face in the paddock that would be kind of new. He's young, which is great. I know PJ's had some rough years over there the last couple of years in the World Superbike paddock. Look, at the end of the day, you want to come back and win. That's the thing. And I think at this point with PJ, he's not getting any younger. And he's a tremendous motorcycle racer, and he needs to be somewhere where he can try to prove that, where he can get the respect that he deserves. And whatever gets put underneath him, he could ride, whether it's 600 or 1,000, it doesn't matter. So I love it. I think it's great if PJ comes back. I've got to spend more time with him this year and talk with him probably more this year than I ever have. And I really like him. So it'd be great for our series to have him come back.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun to have him in the paddock and talk with him and watch his skill on a motorcycle. It's going to be pretty incredible.
Yep.
Well, Jason, do you know that in 5 days' time from now, World Superbike, they're going to be back on the grid testing at Jerez. Kawasaki's going to be there. Yamaha's going to be there, Ducati, and some others. But, I haven't been keeping up with it in the last 2 days. Are all the rides in World Superbike that you know of full yet, or are there still some rides available for people to jump on?
Well, the things that I hear about over there, we talked earlier about Savadori. I was wondering, where's Savadori going to go? Good rider. So far, he's in MotoE, and I think that there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to run a couple different series. I read this week the Xavi Forés and Loris Baz might be going to BSB as possibilities. Baz is in line to maybe take the ride, the second factory Honda seat, I had heard. So we'll kind of see what happens there, because O'Halloran went to the Yamaha team over there, and he'd been with Honda for a while. And Linfoot was out over there as well. So there are some seats available. But I know in World Superbike, we're talking about people moving around and things. And there's a lot of the, say, if you will, the B teams that are out there that are they have rides available. And it goes right back to it, is a lot of these guys have to bring money to get to those teams. So I think that you're seeing guys like Baz and Forés get drawn to a BSB championship where maybe it's not going to cost them as much money to go. Hopefully they can make a little bit of something there if they do get to go. But right now, we don't know what Tenkate's doing or if they're coming back. There was rumors of the Go 11 team getting Aprilia's to possibly run Eugene Laverty, and it sounds like that's kind of gone away. So it's just, I think that we need another week or two to really see where people land and who goes where. But when you see a Savadori going to MotoE, that's obviously he's either he must be getting paid, or it's a way for him to be at those 5 rounds and showcase himself in another paddock to where hopefully, he can try to pick up something there. He's a big guy. I can't imagine him on a Moto2 bike or anything like that in the future. But, these guys right now, everyone's probably getting a little bit desperate. And it'll be interesting to see when these guys roll out in Jerez in not too long a time, if there's any more developments there. And we'll just keep our ear to the ground to see what we can find out.
I'll be very interested to see if the new Honda team, the Althea Honda team, shows up. I was reading an article on bikesportnews.com with Midori Moriwaki, Jason, who you and I talked about in this podcast before, and we're both huge fans of her, the way she runs the Moriwaki business and her love for motorcycle road racing. And, that program that you spoke about earlier moments ago, that Althea Moriwaki Honda HRC program, in the article is very interesting to read. I mentioned that we thought that that they were on Bridgestone tires. 2 years ago, they actually switched in the All Japan Road Race Series to Pirelli tires, specifically with the idea in mind that Midori Moriwaki wanted to take this team to World Superbike. So she wanted to start developing the CBR 1000RR around the World Championship tires Pirelli. In the All Japan Road Race Series, the dominant tire is Bridgestone. So a lot of people a couple of years ago told her, you're crazy to get on Pirellis, but she did it with it in mind. So when that news broke at EICMA, a lot of people thought, wow, that came out of left field. The reality is that Midori Moriwaki has been planning this for 3 years. The interesting note is the interviewer for this article said, well, then you're the official Honda World Superbike team. And she said, well, they kind of, when they announced the team in Italy, it kind of sounded like we were, weren't we? And so I think we were all sitting there going like, yeah. So it's going to be interesting, I think, if Moriwaki and Althea can develop this motorcycle to be a race-winning motorcycle or a race contender, especially when the new CBR 1000RR comes out, that you might see another manufacturer available for these private teams to latch onto and get parts and then create more opportunities. So if Althea becomes the quote-unquote factory Honda team for the paddock, you might see another team that's the second level but very close to competing with it, that, say, the team that PJ Jacobsen was on this year was supposed to compete with. So I'm very intrigued as to what's going to happen with World Superbike, because there are a lot of new motorcycles coming in. And like you're saying, Jason, there's a lot of these secondary teams that if they can start to get dialed in and get a little bit more technical help, that you could see this field, which is already, from second place down pretty tight, pack up even tighter.
Yeah, but you can see a manufacturer. There's one manufacturer that's doing that already, and that's Yamaha. Ducati's fielded other teams, like the Xavi Forés team this year. He was on basically a factory Ducati as well, which I thought was really funny because he's out there as an independent, but he's on a factory bike. But that said, when you look at it, Greg, Yamaha, it's essentially what they've done is they've created another factory Yamaha team with Melandri and Sandro Cortese. And then they've done the same thing in MotoGP where, Tech 3 did have the Yamaha deal, but now it's gone over the Petronas guys. They have two teams as well. So I think what you're saying is very valid there. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
And I can't wait in 5 days to see what's going to happen in the test, because all fears right now are looking at Ducati saying, how could that bike be so fast the very first day of testing? And this next test, if the weather's great, is going to be very interesting. All right, Jay, we're at the point of our show where we're going to do our quick shift segment, where we're going to go through some very quick questions. Maybe, how about 1 minute today we'll give for each of these topics. I'm going to throw a question out to you, and I want some answers. You ready for this?
Great. Let's hear it.
All right, so let's see. Here we go. Let's rattle off some questions here. The first topic is going to be Moto2 engines, Jason. So Honda CBR 600 motor for the last, has it been 9 years? Over 1.7 million miles logged. That's 3 trips to the moon and back. Now to Triumph 765 triples. What do you think the impact's going to be on Moto2 now with the new motor?
Well, we're talking about Honda going back and forth to the moon 3 times. I don't know how many Triumphs could do that, so let's just hope that those bikes stay together. I know that there's a lot of testing going on right now, and I think that there's going to be that big question mark of reliability. I think it's great that a company like Triumph stuck up and took the reins of the Moto2 class. If you and I had been sitting here 5 years ago and said to ourselves, out of all the manufacturers, who's going to be second in Moto2 to take the engine development, I don't think either one of us would have picked Triumph. So that's great for them.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of development on the chassis side of things, because you're talking about a motor now that produces more horsepower and definitely more torque. So I think the Moto2 chassis manufacturers are going to have to go back to the drawing board. I know there's been a test mule that roadracingworld.com and Chris Ulrich got to ride. It was in the rain, unfortunately, but I'm still looking forward to reading that article and Chris Ulrich's impressions on what he thought of that Triumph motor and the Moto2 bike, because I think you're going to see some very exciting things for 2019 with Moto2. All right, Jason, I'm going to pick this one up real quick because I'm very interested in what you have to say on this one. Moto2 and Moto3 qualifying now match MotoGP. So that means that we should eliminate 30 riders trying to draft each other for a lap time, and it'll be down to 14 fastest. A good thing or not a good thing, the new qualifying?
Good thing. I think it's going to get these guys ready for when they do advance to MotoGP. I think if you have all the classes kind of doing the same thing with QP1, QP2, that's tremendous. I still feel Moto3 is a joke the way they do qualifying, in the sense that these guys are stopping on the racetrack. Obviously, whatever Dorna has done to implement penalties and stuff hasn't really worked out that well. I think it's going to take a lot harsher penalties, because it's just a matter of time before these guys start really running into each other and getting each other hurt. That said, every weekend I watch, every weekend I say that, nothing really happens. So maybe it's just me watching and being more scared, but I think that something's got to be done. I just don't like seeing guys touring around on the racetrack, Greg. I think it frustrates me. So there won't be as many guys, but there'll still be at least 10 or 12 or 14 that are all going to be doing it together.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I don't like riders looking back and touring around, because anytime, I don't even care if you're going slow or whatever, every time you take your eyes off the front, off the focus of where you're headed, it can be a dangerous situation. No question about it.
Yep. Josh Herrin test this week with Yoshimura, Greg, and we were supposed to know kind of by yesterday. Internal sources have said that he tested well, and he liked, and obviously he loved the overall vibe. How could you not at Yoshimura? Your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, there's so many rumors going around. I mean, right before we went on air, we had somebody on Facebook who was like, hey, Valentin DeBee's got to ride. And it's like, well, hold up a second, okay? My view is this, Jason. Whatever's going on internally with Yosh, I'm going to wait, because I hear things, you hear things. I'm going to wait till the official press release comes out. But it's always a good sign when I hear from people inside of Yosh that they had a good test. The problem is that they said that with Valentin and they said that with Josh Herrin. So I think you have competing factions right now, meaning like you have a Suzuki and Yosh, and I'm not sure if they want the exact same thing, but there is a rumor that somebody's been already spoken to. There's a rumor that it's one guy. There's a rumor that it's another guy. Either way, I think that we're going to have resolution to this situation coming up in the next couple of weeks. I hope by December 1st. That'll set Yosh on a path on who they can test with for 2019. And then this whole thing will be done and dusted, and then we'll see if some other things fall into place. All right, Jay, Kyle Wyman. Want to bring Kyle Wyman up because he's off of Yamaha. He's linked to two manufacturers, either Kawasaki or BMW, most likely BMW at this point. What are your thoughts on Kyle?
Well, his brother raced Superstock 1000 with BMW, and they had a really nice looking little effort there. I think it would be a great change for Kyle to get off the Yamaha, get on something else. He didn't have the best year this last year. He had some struggles. I know he's got Gary Dean by his side, and those two guys work very well together. I think a change would do Kyle very well. The kid can ride anything, so I'm not I don't really have any questions on that. I would like to see him on a Kawasaki, only because we don't have a good Kawasaki really running in our class right now. I think that Dave Anthony's been trying to do it for the last couple of years, but he's on his own. He's doing his own thing. It's very hard to be driving the truck, building the motors, and racing a motorcycle. I think that if you could get a rider like Kyle or David who could just focus only on their riding, I think that there's a package there with the Cowie that could be really good. But I'm torn, Greg, because I love the BMW as well. So either one of those two would be great for me.
The best thing for Kyle is that both those companies, BMW and Kawasaki, have very strong contingency programs.
Yep.
And Kyle told me that with the race results he got last year, that he would have more money in his pocket if he was on, say, a BMW than any other motorcycle. All right, so that's Greg's Garage Pod for this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. Any final thoughts from you, Jason?
Nope. Everybody go out. Tomorrow's cheat day. Eat whatever you want. Have a happy Thanksgiving. If you're with families, enjoy a day of football and enjoy a day of eating. So that's what I'm going to be doing, G-Dub.
All right, sounds good. Don't forget to spread the word, too, especially during these holidays. What better time than to download some podcasts and kill some time if you're on an airplane or on a long drive or even trying to get away from your family if it's day 2 or 3 and you're sick of them. So thanks for listening. Don't forget, we're available on iTunes. We're available on Podbean, on Google Play, and also on Spotify. So we're all over the place. And if you have anything that you want us to talk about, make sure you get a hold of us through social media and we'll do it. So thanks for joining us here on the Greg's Garage Pod with Jason and Greg. And we will talk to you next week.